There is a story, often whispered, of a government behind the government. It is a narrative of shadows and unseen hands, puppet strings pulled from rooms far from the public eye. This is the concept of the deep state, more spy thriller than sober governance. But its origins are not fiction. They are the cold, hard realities of history. This essay will explore that history, tracing threads of hidden power in the modern state. How intelligence money influence converge to shape policy, often without the consent or knowledge of the governed. Free from partisan rhetoric. The deep state is not cartoon villains, but a durable network within and adjacent to the state. Elements include intelligence agencies, senior military officials, corporate financiers, defense contractors. Not one conspiracy, but shared interests and a belief in the right to act in secret. They use state power, shaping policy out of public view, creating a hidden layer that spans administrations. The story starts in the ashes of the War, with the anxieties of the Cold War. The world split into two blocks, and a new secret warfare emerged. Nations feared rivals. Intelligence agencies expanded rapidly. The United States created the CIA. Britain empowered MI6. The Soviet Union wielded the KGB. These organizations did more than gather information. They acted, intervened, and shaped the political landscape of other nations. They became the instruments of covert statecraft. They ran secret operations, funneled money to foreign parties, trained paramilitary forces, orchestrated propaganda. Their aim: contain rival ideologies and secure strategic advantages, access to natural resources, loyalty of key governments. These actions were done in deep secrecy, violating sovereignty and bypassing democratic checks. A state with a second, hidden face, operating by its own rules. The Cold War was the crucible in which the modern secret state was forged. A period of sustained, low-grade global conflict that justified a permanent state of high alert. Intelligence networks, born from wartime espionage, did not disband after 1945. Instead, they expanded and became institutionalized. In the United States, the National Security Act of 1947 created the CIA. It also gave the president broad, vaguely defined powers to authorize covert actions. This legal framework created a space for operations in a gray zone, beyond the reach of normal congressional oversight or public scrutiny. The agency was built to be an instrument of the presidency, a silent weapon in the long struggle against the Soviet Union. The CIA's early operations set a pattern that would be repeated for decades. Covert action became a default tool of foreign policy, a way to exert influence without the political risks of a full-scale military invasion. These actions ranged from funding anti-communist labor unions in France, funding anti-communist labor unions in Italy, to airdropping agents behind the Iron Curtain, as historian Stephen Kinzer has documented. The agency's leaders were often drawn from Wall Street law firms and from investment banks. They saw the world as a grand chessboard. They believed it was their duty to arrange the pieces to America's advantage, using any means necessary to counter perceived threats, and to secure national interests, which often coincided with corporate interests. These intelligence networks did not operate in a vacuum. They formed deep and lasting connections with the burgeoning military sector and with the corporate sector. President Dwight D. Eisenhower, in his 1961 farewell address, warned of the military-industrial complex, a nexus of the armed forces and a massive arms industry. This alliance created a powerful lobby for sustained high defense spending and for an aggressive foreign policy. Perceived threats justified massive budgets, which funded the development of new weapons and intelligence technologies. The companies that built these tools gained immense influence. Their executives often moved between corporate boardrooms and high-level government posts. This fusion of intelligence, military, and corporate power created a formidable constituency for secrecy. Policy decisions could be influenced not just by strategic analysis, but by the financial interests of defense contractors and their shareholders. A declassified National Security Council directive from 1948, NSC 10-2, authorized propaganda, economic warfare, preventive direct action including sabotage, anti-sabotage, demolition, evacuation measures, subversion against hostile states including assistance to underground resistance movements, guerrillas, and refugee liberation groups. This document provided the secret charter for a global campaign, giving a small group of officials the authority to wage a hidden war, the details of which would remain classified for decades. One of the earliest and most consequential examples of the deep state in action can be found in Iran in 1953. The operation, codenamed Tepa Jacks by the CIA, stands as a stark illustration of covert power used to overthrow a democratic government. The target was Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh, a popular nationalist who moved to nationalize Iran's oil industry. The oil industry had long been controlled by the British-owned Anglo-Iranian Oil Company. To Britain, this was an unacceptable threat to economic power. To the United States, it looked like a potential opening for Soviet influence. The plan was a joint effort between Britain's MI6 and the CIA, with Americans leading on the ground. CIA operative Kermit Roosevelt Jr., grandson of Theodore Roosevelt, arrived in Tehran with a suitcase full of cash. The agency's strategy was multifaceted: propaganda, bribery, and orchestrated violence. They hired agents to write hostile newspaper articles, paid clerics to denounce Mossadegh in sermons, and bribed members of the Iranian parliament. This was a campaign to manufacture a crisis. Photos show hired demonstrators clashing in Tehran's streets. The first attempt fizzled and the Shah fled in panic. CIA operatives doubled down, mobilizing military contacts. On August 19, 1953, forces loyal to the Shah and CIA-funded mobs stormed government buildings and arrested Mossadegh. The Shah returned to power and ruled as an absolute monarch for 26 years, backed by U.S. support. 2 decades after the events in Iran, the same hidden mechanisms of state were deployed in Latin America, this time in Chile. In 1970, Salvador Allende, a physician, an avowed Marxist, was elected president. His platform of nationalizing key industries, including the massive American-owned copper mines, and instituting land reforms sent shockwaves through Washington and on Wall Street. President Richard Nixon, Henry Kissinger, saw Allende's government as a red sandwich that could trap the region between a communist Cuba and a socialist Chile. They were determined to prevent his government from succeeding by any means necessary. From the moment of Allende's election, the CIA was authorized to undermine him. A declassified memo records Nixon's stark order to CIA Director Richard Helms: "Make the economy scream." The U.S. government began invisible economic warfare, blocking international loans to Chile, discouraging private investment, and funding opposition political parties and media outlets to create economic and social chaos. Documents reveal a 2-track policy. Track 1 applied quiet economic and political pressure. Track 2 actively sought to foment a military coup. The CIA encouraged right-wing officers and signaled U.S. support. On September 11, 1973, General Augusto Pinochet led a violent takeover, bombing the presidential palace in Santiago. President Allende refused to surrender and died during the assault. What followed was 17 years of a brutal military dictatorship under which tens of thousands were tortured, killed, or disappeared. The U.S. quickly recognized and supported Pinochet's regime. Like Iran before it, Chile shows how hidden networks using financial leverage and covert intelligence can override the democratic will, leaving a legacy of trauma for generations. The Cold War-era military-industrial complex has evolved in the 21st century into something even more intricate and powerful: a military-industrial financial complex. This is not a formal organization, but a sprawling ecosystem. National security, corporate profit, global finance, deeply intertwined. The end of the Cold War did not bring a peace dividend. New threats, culminating in the attacks of September 11, 2001, spurred massive expansions, this time with significant outsourcing to the private sector. Private military companies, intelligence analysis firms, technology contractors now perform tasks once reserved for government. They bid on multi-billion contracts from war logistics to sophisticated data mining. This creates a powerful profit motive for perpetual conflict and surveillance. Large investment banks and private equity finance the sector and hold stakes, amplifying influence in Washington. Financial institutions are top donors and heavy lobbyists, shaping regulations, taxes, and budgets. A 2008 Center for Public Integrity report noted post-9/11 defense contractors spent over $1 billion on lobbying and contributions while receiving trillions in contracts. Money, corporate power, state secrecy forms the bedrock of the modern deep state, a system that is largely legal but operates with minimal transparency and accountability, The rise of the digital age has provided the hidden structures of the state with tools of unprecedented power and reach. The vast oceans of data generated by modern life, our emails, phone calls, social media posts, financial transactions, have become a new frontier for intelligence gathering. After the 9/11 attacks, a legal and technological apparatus was constructed to collect and analyze this data on a global scale. Programs with codenames like Prism, Stellarwind, later revealed by Edward Snowden, showed the extent of this new surveillance architecture, built in secret and authorized by classified legal interpretations. This technological revolution was a public-private partnership. Major telecom and tech companies collaborated, sometimes willingly, sometimes under legal duress, to provide access to data streams and infrastructure. This blurs the line between commercial surveillance and state surveillance. The same data mining used to sell products can track associations, political beliefs, private behaviors, creating digital dossiers on millions not suspected of any crime. New media has transformed propaganda into information warfare. Disinformation spreads via bots, analytics build psychological profiles, operators deliver micro-targeted messages to exploit fears and reinforce biases at massive, individualized scale, with sources nearly impossible to trace. The reveal is not an explosion, but the quiet hum of a server farm. Networks operating through fiber optic cables and algorithms embedded in the infrastructure of our lives. This digital deep state is more pervasive, less visible, and far harder to hold accountable. In the era following the 9/11 attacks, the balance between national security and public transparency shifted dramatically towards secrecy. Faced with a new kind of non-state enemy, governments expanded surveillance powers. The Patriot Act granted broad new authorities to monitor communications. Secret legal interpretations by a clandestine court authorized bulk collection of phone records and internet data belonging to millions, hidden for over a decade. A vast contractor apparatus facilitated this expansion, outsourcing IT management, data analysis, and interrogation. The Washington Post's Top Secret America found 1,271 government organizations and 1,931 private companies working on counterterrorism, homeland security, and intelligence. Critical functions moved to for-profit entities with little direct public oversight, shielded by layers of corporate and government classification. The story emerges through declassifications, leaks, and lawsuits, OLC memos crafting secret justifications for mass surveillance and enhanced interrogation, IG reports detailing weak oversight, a 2014 Senate report finding the CIA's program more brutal and less effective than portrayed. Who is watching the watchers? Traditional oversight and courts struggle against speed and secrecy, technical complexity, and incomplete information, yielding a governance gap, with power increasingly virtual on classified servers and secure data centers. We have journeyed through the shadows of the modern state, covert battlefields of the Cold War, digital frontiers of the 21st century. We have seen how networks of intelligence operatives, military leaders, corporate financiers can act in concert, often in secret, to shape events and direct the course of nations. From the overthrow of Mossadegh in Iran, economic siege of Allende's Chile, rise of the military-industrial complex, dawn of mass digital surveillance, a consistent pattern emerges. It is a pattern of hidden power operating parallel to the democratic process, justified by national security, often driven by financial and ideological interests. The deep state is not a monolithic entity. It is complex and human, powerful institutions and overlapping networks who share a culture of secrecy and a belief in their right to act beyond public view. Its power is derived from control over information, access to tools of coercion, deep integration with a globalized financial system. This is not a partisan issue. These structures have persisted under administrations of both parties. Who decides what is kept secret and for whose benefit? When the interests of a defense contractor or a Wall Street bank align with a proposed foreign policy, how can we be sure the decision is for the right reasons? How can we provide meaningful consent when so much is hidden? And in an age of overwhelming technological power, who is truly watching the watchers? The path forward must be greater transparency and more robust oversight, strengthening congressional committees, protecting whistleblowers, reforming classification laws, and a public educated, skeptical, and willing to demand records.